Hi, Jeff Hall here, and I'm going to do a basically overview of a Edgar Allan Poe short story about his life and about the story in general, and talk about how it's branched over to today. Edgar Allan Poe was born in 1809 and he died in 1849. The causes of death are rumored. A lot of people say he died because of his alcoholism. A lot of people say he was murdered because he had a lot of enemies. Because Edgar Allan Poe was a pretty smart guy, and he was very intelligent, but he knew it too, and he kind of had a smart mouth and was very smart alecky. And some people think that led to his death, because along with being an author of famous literature such as The Raven, The Fall of the House of Usher, which I'm going to overview, Telltale Heart, all those famous stories, he was also a literary criticist. He would do criticisms of literature, and I'm sure if there was something he didn't like, he probably would have wrote a harsh review, because he was brilliant and he probably, on an intellectual smart level, could have been harsh with that. Well, he was born of the son John Allen Richmond of Virginia, and he was a merchant, and his mom died at 3, so I guess his mom really wasn't in the picture long, so that could make a boy gloomy. That could explain why he wrote a lot of dark, gloomy literature. Poe is very known for the whole Gothic thing. A lot of people say that he helped to popularize it or helped to start it, and his literature definitely is in a lot of cases, especially with Fall of the House of Usher, which I'm going to review, is definitely Gothic. And that would influence things in the Gothic subculture as well, like such as movies like this, The Crow right here. That's a perfect example of just a lot of things that were influenced by Poe. And in that film, The Raven is quoted by Brandon Lee. So you know that Poe has influenced a lot of the arts, whether they be movies, whether they be music, such as Gothic bands like Fear Cult, who did a song actually on the Telltale Heart. So there's bands that are influenced by him. His influence has lasted quite a legacy. There's been movies done, Hollywood movies with Vincent Price. So he's really stood the test of time, and he's considered one of the greats. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is going to be coming out of this book, and it's going to be in my works cited page. That's the story and its writer, and I have it works cited too. So, but a lot of what I'm getting my information out of is that, and also things I've learned over the past, like in 7th grade, because 7th grade books like The Telltale Heart and Edgar Allan Poe in general, that's like just common. You know, you read it in 7th grade and 8th grade. It's junior high, so of course you learn about Edgar Allan Poe at a pretty young age, usually if you go to school, which most of us Americans do. So, and his dad was born in Richmond, Virginia, which I think is kind of interesting because Virginia was, I don't know if it was the first colony or one of the first colonies Americans settled in after, getting away from Britain. And if that's the case, that kind of makes sense why Edgar Allan Poe wrote The Fall of the House of Usher, which was basically really dissing the British aristocracy, because there was a lot of inbreeding in The Fall of House of Usher, and that would explain a lot of why the story's written the way it is. And in The Fall of the House of Usher, basically, the house is decaying, like the aristocracy probably decayed, and royalty in general, and the brother is sick, this friend goes to visit his friend, and it's basically his brother and sister is Roderick Usher, and I think Madeline Usher was her name. They're in a mansion and it's crumbling down and it's decaying, just like their inbred race. And with the aristocracy back in the day, they were commonly known to inbreed. So you'd have like cousins marrying cousins, sometimes brothers marrying sisters. It was really nasty. And the way the mansion's described in the book, like pestilential and nasty and decaying, it kind of showcases the state of the brother and sister because they have like a disease from their incest and they're not feeling well. Roderick is clearly ill, and what happens is he wants to get away from his desire for Madeline Usher, his sister, so Roderick ends up burying her alive, or basically just shutting her up in a tomb so he can just resist his urges for her. And to me it's symbolic of lust in general, but in this particular case it's inbredative lust. It's a brother and a sister, and it's just pretty nasty in general. Very weird, nasty book, if you ask me. I was not very fond of it. It fits the gothic category pretty well because, like, I'm gonna go into the first page here. Like, this is the very first sentence of this story. During the whole of a dark and cloudless, during the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens. I mean, that's just a very dark and gloomy bummer way to start a story. You're in for something pretty gloomy right there when you read that. And what's autumn associated with? Fall. What happens in the fall? All the leaves die. Everything falls down. Everything dies, and any literary story that begins like that, you're like, oh, this is gonna be one gloomy trip. And it's got a lot of gloomy lines in it, and it's just the trees are decayed, and trying to find it on this page. Should have took some notes so I could be quicker about this, but they talk about this tarn, and it's the bottom page 1116 in this book. It says, let's see, the air of heaven. Oh, okay, an atmosphere which had no affinity with the air of heaven. Wow, that's like anti-heaven, like probably hell, I don't know, that's a dark line. But which had reeked up from the decayed trees and the grey wall and the silent tarn a pestilent and mystic vapor, dull, sluggish, faintly discernible, and leaden-hued. So anything leaden-hued is diseased, and pestilent, or if you want to know what pestilence means, is disease. So that's kind of almost symbolic of the illness that Roderick Usher has too, from all the inbreeding and everything else. So the house itself and the land which surrounds the house really epitomizes Roderick and Madeline. It's like their foundation is exactly how they are. But I also see this as a stab at the aristocracy as well. And Madeline and Roderick can be anybody, but I think all they are is just symbols to take a stab at the inbreeding and the fall of the aristocracy. That's what I believe it's all about right there. This was a very gloomy story from a very gloomy author who wrote a lot of gloomy things, from Telltale Heart about a man's obsession with a guy's eye, wanting to rip it out and then chopping him in pieces and putting it under the house, to this story. Well, at the end, Broderick and his sister die with the decaying of the house as it collapses and tumbles down, which is, it's like their final epitaph. It's a very suiting way to die. And it's kind of like the fall of kings, the fall of aristocracy, when the ship sinks, the captain sinks with it. It's just very poetic way to die and very, appropriate, I guess. But yeah, it's a very gloomy story, and Poe is a very gloomy writer. But knowing these things about his life, it might help one to better understand why the story was written the way it is and why Edgar Allan Poe wrote the way he did. And that's basically what I'm going to present to this class today, because I'm probably already went over the 5-minute mark. But I hope that teaches somebody something new that wasn't mentioned in class. And again, it's from this book is where I got most of my information, the book we're reading. And this is my works cited page. Hold on. I'm going to let that stay on the screen for a while so it can be seen. You can pause it if you want, I guess, if you really wanted to read it. But that's my works cited from the book. And again, I use this movie as an example because it's considered part of the Gothic culture. It's a good movie too, by the way. And there's a scene where he quotes the Raven, the main character does. And I really showed that to showcase how well Poe's work has stood the test of time. Because it's in, movies that weren't made long ago, and it still is in music that's being made and in movies that are being made. And I'm Jeff, and that's my presentation for literature class.